Hello, my friend. Today, you are going to learn English by understanding something that almost nobody in the world of language teaching talks about seriously enough. You are going to learn English by understanding your brain. Because here is the truth, and I want you to really hear this. The reason most people never become fluent in English is not that they are not smart enough, not that they did not study hard enough, not that they started too late, or live in the wrong country, or do not have access to the right resources. The reason most people never become fluent in English is that they are training the wrong thing. They are training their memory when they should be training their brain. They are trying to store English when they should be trying to wire English. And today, I am going to show you exactly what the difference is and exactly what you need to do to start training your brain, not just your memory to speak English fluently, automatically, and naturally. Before I say anything else, I want to tell you something about my own brain. When I was a child, my brain was wired entirely for one language. That was the only language my family spoke, the only language my school used, the only language the streets and the markets and the radio in our house spoke back to me. My brain, in those early years, was a beautifully organized system for one language and one language only. Every thought I had, every feeling I experienced, every story I told myself about who I was and what the world meant, all of it ran through a single linguistic channel. And then one day, I decided to build a second channel. Not because someone told me to, not because a school required it, because I looked at the world around me and I understood, with the clarity that sometimes only comes to a child, that there were people I could not yet reach, and conversations I could not yet have, and opportunities I could not yet see, and that all of it was separated from me by a single barrier, the English language. So I got on my bicycle every morning before the sun came up, and I rode 40 minutes to a hotel where foreign tourists stayed, and I began the long, uncomfortable, often embarrassing process of rewiring my brain. I did not know that was what I was doing. I did not have the scientific vocabulary for it. But looking back now, I understand that every conversation I forced myself into, every mistake I made and recovered from, every moment of confusion and breakthrough and laughter and frustration, all of it was literally changing the physical structure of my brain, building new connections, strengthening new pathways, creating, slowly and then suddenly, a second channel through which the world could flow. This is what I want for you. Not just more English words in your head, a new channel in your brain. And today, I am going to tell you how to build it. Let us start with something that scientists have understood for decades, but that most language teachers have been slow to apply. The brain learns through repetition, but not the kind of repetition most people think of when they hear that word. Most people think repetition means doing the same thing many times, writing a word 50 times on a piece of paper, or repeating a grammar rule until you can recite it perfectly. This kind of repetition does strengthen certain types of memory, but it does not build the kind of automatic, fluent language production that real English communication requires. The repetition that builds fluency is different. It is varied repetition. It is encountering the same word or structure in many different contexts, many different situations, many different emotional registers, until the brain stops treating it as new information to be processed and starts treating it as known territory to move through automatically. Think about driving a car. When you first learned to drive, you had to think consciously about every single action, how much pressure on the accelerator, when to check the mirror, how to judge the distance between your car and the one in front. Every action required deliberate attention. And now, if you have been driving for a few years, most of those actions happen without any conscious thought at all. You hold a conversation, you listen to music, you think about something completely unrelated to driving, and your hands and feet are doing exactly the right things at exactly the right moments without your conscious mind being involved at all. This is what neuroscientists call automaticity. And automaticity is exactly what fluent English speaking feels like. The words come without searching for them. The grammar assembles itself without you choosing each piece. The sentences arrive whole, not built piece by piece. You cannot achieve this through studying alone. Studying builds knowledge. But automaticity is built through practice, specifically through a particular kind of practice that I want to describe to you now, because understanding this kind of practice is the central key to everything else we are going to talk about today. The kind of practice that builds automaticity in language is called output practice. Output means producing language, speaking or writing, as opposed to input, which means receiving language through listening or reading. Most language learners spend the vast majority of their time on input. They listen to podcasts, they watch videos, they read articles and books. And input is genuinely important. I will talk about that more in a moment. But input alone, no matter how much of it you do, will not make you a fluent speaker. Because speaking is a performance skill. And performance skills are only built through performance. A musician who only ever listens to music and never plays an instrument will never become a musician, no matter how many hours they spend listening. A swimmer who only ever watches swimming will drown the moment they enter the water. And a language learner who only ever consumes English but never produces it will freeze the moment a native speaker asks them a simple question. So output practice is essential, but it has to be the right kind of output practice. And here is where most people make their second big mistake. They practice output only when they feel ready. They study and prepare and plan. And then, when they feel sufficiently prepared, they attempt to speak. But the preparation never feels complete enough. There's always one more grammar point to review, one more vocabulary set to learn, one more episode to watch before they feel ready to open their mouth. And so the output practice keeps getting postponed, and the fluency keeps getting delayed, and the gap between where they are and where they want to be stays exactly the same width year after year. The truth is that the brain does not learn to speak English by getting ready to speak English. It learns by speaking English before it is ready. The discomfort of speaking before you are fully prepared, the search for words, the imperfect sentences, the moments of genuine struggle is not an obstacle to learning. It is the learning. Every time your brain has to reach for a word it is not completely sure of, it strengthens the pathway to that word. Every time you construct a sentence without being certain the grammar is right, you give your brain feedback that it uses to calibrate future sentences. Every mistake is data, and data is what the brain uses to build fluency. I want to tell you about a specific morning at the hotel that I have thought about many times since. I had been going there for perhaps 3 years at that point. My English was improving, but slowly. I still made many mistakes. My pronunciation was still sometimes difficult for people to understand. And one morning a man arrived, an older man, an academic from a country I had never visited, and we began to talk. And I remember clearly the moment when something shifted. We were talking about history, about the relationship between different countries, about the way the past shapes the present, and I realized that I was not searching for words anymore. I was thinking the thoughts and the English was coming, not perfectly, but continuously, without the gaps and the panic that I was used to. I was not translating, I was speaking. For the first time, I was genuinely speaking English rather than performing it. That morning was not an accident. It was the result of 3 years of daily practice, of thousands of small, uncomfortable moments, of a brain that had been slowly, invisibly building new pathways every single day. That morning, enough pathways had been built. And something crossed a threshold that I had not even known was there. Your brain has that threshold too. And the question is only how quickly you want to reach it. Let me talk about something called spaced repetition, because this is one of the most important concepts in brain-based language learning and one of the most misunderstood. Most people, when they encounter a new English word, learn it once and then either remember it or forget it. If they forget it, they might encounter it again by chance or they might not. This is how passive learning works, and it is extremely inefficient. The brain has a forgetting curve. Without any reinforcement, most new information is lost within days, within a week. Up to 80% of what you learned in a single study session can be gone. This is not a flaw in your brain, it is a feature. The brain is constantly making decisions about what to keep and what to discard based on signals about what is important and what is not. And the most powerful signal of importance is repetition over time. Spaced repetition is the practice of reviewing information at specific intervals that are timed to catch the memory just before it fades. You encounter a word today, you review it tomorrow, then in 3 days, then in a week, then in 2 weeks. Each time you successfully recall the word, the interval before the next review gets longer, because the brain needs less prompting to keep information that has already been retrieved successfully multiple times. Over time, the word moves from short-term memory to long-term memory to something deeper still. Something that feels less like memory and more like knowledge that simply is. The word becomes part of you in the same way that your own name is part of you. You do not remember your name, you know it. That is where you want your English vocabulary to live. Not in the filing cabinet of memory. in the fabric of who you are. There are applications that use spaced repetition algorithms to manage this process for you, but you do not need an application. You can do it yourself with a simple notebook. Write down every new English word or phrase you encounter every day. Review the words from 3 days ago, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Spend no more than 10 minutes on this review. The consistency matters far more than the duration. 10 minutes every day for a year will do more for your English vocabulary than 5 hours on a single Saturday, and the science of memory is entirely clear on this point. Now I want to talk about something that is related to brain training, but that lives in the body as well as the mind, which is the physical act of speaking. Most people think of language as a purely mental activity. Words exist in the mind, sentences are assembled in the mind, and then the mouth delivers them to the outside world. But this is not quite right. Speaking is a physical skill as much as it is a cognitive one. The mouth, the tongue, the lips, the jaw, the breath, all of these are muscles and mechanisms that need to be trained, specifically trained, to produce the sounds of English. And for speakers of languages whose sounds are significantly different from English, this physical training is not optional. It is absolutely necessary. English has sounds that do not exist in many other languages. The pun sound, which requires the tongue to touch the back of the upper teeth in a way that many languages never use. The difference between the short I sound in ship and the long E sound in sheep, which in English changes the meaning completely, but in many other languages sounds almost identical. The way English words often run together in natural speech, so that would you becomes would ya, and going to becomes gonna, and want to becomes wanna. These are not errors that native speakers make. They are features of natural spoken English that every fluent speaker uses automatically. And if you have only ever practiced careful, deliberate, word-by-word English, the fast, connected, reduced English of real conversation will sound like a completely different language to your ears and feel almost physically impossible for your mouth. The way to train the physical dimension of English is through something called shadowing. Shadowing is a practice where you listen to a native speaker and simultaneously repeat what they are saying, trying to match not just the words, but the speed, the rhythm, the rise and fall of the voice, the way words connect and reduce and flow into each other. It is called shadowing because you follow the native speaker like a shadow, slightly behind, always imitating, never leading. This practice feels extremely difficult at first. You will fall behind. You will miss words. You will find that your mouth simply cannot move fast enough to keep up with what you are hearing. This is normal. This is the training working. Every time you push your mouth to move faster, to connect sounds it has never connected before, to produce rhythms it has never produced before, you are building the physical fluency that mental study alone can never give you. Shadow for 10 minutes every day. Any content will work. A podcast, a speech, a conversation, in a film. Choose something at a level slightly above your current comfort. And do not worry about understanding every word. The goal of shadowing is not comprehension. The goal is physical imitation. Let your mouth learn the shape of English independently of your understanding of its content. Over weeks and months, you will notice something remarkable. Your mouth will begin to feel different when you speak English. More comfortable, more natural. As though English sounds belong to it, not just as visitors, but as permanent residents. I also want to talk about something that many people who are training their brain to speak English completely overlook, which is the importance of what you do immediately after a speaking experience. Most people finish a conversation in English, whether it went well or badly, and simply move on. They think about what they had for lunch or what they need to do this afternoon, and the conversation disappears. But there is a window of time immediately after a speaking experience, perhaps 30 minutes to an hour, during which the brain is particularly receptive to learning from that experience. The pathways that were just used are still warm, still active, still available for reinforcement. And what you do in that window determines how much of the experience you actually retain. In that window, do this. Think back over the conversation. Not to judge yourself, not to replay the mistakes with shame, but to notice. What did you want to say that you could not find the words for? What did the other person say that you did not fully understand? What phrase did they use that you had never heard before? What did you say that seemed to land well, that the other person responded to naturally? Write these things down if you can. Look up the words you could not find. Say the phrases you want to remember out loud. several times, right now, while the context is still fresh. This practice of deliberate reflection, immediately after output, transforms a single conversation into multiple learning events. It doubles, sometimes triples, the value of every English interaction you have. And there is one more thing I want to say before I close. Something that sits underneath everything else we have talked about today. Something that is both the simplest and the most difficult part of training your brain to speak English. It is this. You have to believe that your brain can do it. Not as an affirmation, not as a positive attitude exercise, but as a factual understanding of what the human brain is capable of. Because the brain is not fixed. It is not finished. It does not stop growing and changing and rewiring at any age for any person in any circumstance. This is one of the most important scientific discoveries of the last 30 years, the discovery of neuroplasticity, the understanding that the brain physically changes in response to experience throughout the entire human lifespan. Every new language skill you practice is not just a memory you are storing. It is a physical change in the structure of your brain. New connections are forming. New pathways are strengthening. New territory is being claimed. I was not born with an English brain. Nobody is. The boy who rode that bicycle in the cold, dark morning had a brain wired entirely for one language, with no particular aptitude for English, with no resources, with no guarantee of success. What that boy had was the willingness to show up every day and put his brain in contact with English, real English, messy and imperfect and alive, until the brain had no choice but to begin changing, until the pathways formed, until the threshold was crossed, until the morning came when the words arrived without searching, and the sentences flowed without forcing. And for the first time, the language did not feel like something he was carrying, but something he was moving through. That morning is waiting for you. Your brain is already beginning to change. Every English word you have ever heard, every sentence you have ever understood, every conversation you have ever managed, however imperfectly, all of it has already built something inside you. The pathways already exist. They are just not yet strong enough to carry the full weight of fluent speech. And the only thing that will strengthen them is what has always strengthened them: showing up, speaking, making mistakes, reflecting, and showing up again. Train your brain, not your memory, not your fear, your brain. It is the most extraordinary learning machine ever created, and it is yours, and it is ready, and it has been waiting for exactly this. Begin today. Your brain already knows the way. But I want to stay with you longer today, because there are things about training your brain to speak English that I have not yet said, things that I think about often, things that took me many years to understand, and that I wish someone had told me much earlier. So let us keep going together, because the conversation is not finished yet. I want to talk about the relationship between confidence and competence, because most people have this relationship backwards in their minds. They believe that competence comes first and confidence follows. They believe that you first become good at something, and then, as a natural result of being good at it, you begin to feel confident. And so they wait. They study and they practice in private, and they tell themselves that they will speak English confidently once their English is good enough, once they have enough vocabulary, once their grammar is solid, once they can understand native speakers without any difficulty. Once the competence is there, the confidence will come. But this is not how the brain works. And it is not how confidence works either. Confidence is not a feeling that arrives after competence. Confidence is a feeling that is built through action, through repeated experience of doing something and surviving it, through the accumulation of evidence that you are capable, evidence that only comes from actually trying. In other words, confidence and competence build each other simultaneously. They are not sequential. They are parallel. Every time you speak English and manage, not perfectly, not brilliantly, but manage, your brain registers a small piece of evidence. I did that. It was uncomfortable, but I did it, and the world did not end. And that evidence, accumulated over hundreds and eventually thousands of interactions, becomes the feeling we call confidence. Not because you waited for it, because you built it, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. This means that the person who speaks English before they feel ready is not being reckless. They are being intelligent. They understand, perhaps instinctively, that the only way to train the brain for confident English speaking is to put the brain in situations that require confident English speaking, even when the confidence is not yet there. The brain adapts to demands placed on it. Put demands on your brain. Speak before you are ready. Your brain will rise to meet the demand more quickly than you believe possible. I also want to talk about something called the inner critic, because the inner critic is one of the most powerful obstacles to training your brain to speak English, and yet it is almost never discussed in language learning contexts. The inner critic is the voice inside your head that evaluates everything you do, usually harshly. For language learners, the inner critic sounds like this. That sentence was wrong. Your pronunciation is terrible. You paused too long. They think your English is bad. You should have said it differently. You are not improving. You will never be fluent. Everyone else in the room speaks better English than you. This voice is extraordinarily damaging to language learning, not just emotionally, but neurologically. When the inner critic is loud and active, it consumes cognitive resources that your brain needs for the actual task of speaking. It is like trying to drive a car while someone in the passenger seat is constantly shouting criticism at you. Not only is it unpleasant, it genuinely makes you a worse driver because your attention is divided. The same is true for speaking. When part of your brain is simultaneously speaking English and harshly evaluating the English it is producing, both activities suffer. The speaking becomes more hesitant, more fragmented, more error-prone, which then gives the inner critic more material to work with, which makes the speaking worse still. It is a downward spiral that every English learner knows intimately. The way out of this spiral is not to silence the inner critic entirely. That is not possible, and trying to force silence creates its own kind of mental tension. The way out is to change the inner critic's job. Instead of evaluating, give it the job of noticing. There is a profound difference between these two things. Evaluating says that was wrong, you failed, you are not good enough. Noticing says that sentence was different from how a native speaker would say it. Interesting. I will pay attention to that. Noticing is curious. It is interested. It is on your side. And it gives your brain the feedback it needs to improve without the emotional damage that evaluation creates. Every time you catch the inner critic evaluating, gently redirect it. You are not here to judge. You are here to notice. And what do you notice? Let me now say something about the people around you and the role they play in training your brain to speak English, because this is something that is deeply underestimated. The people you speak English with are not just conversation partners. They are training partners. And like all training partners, they can either accelerate your development or slow it down, depending on how they engage with you. The training partners who accelerate your development are the ones who listen to what you mean rather than how you say it, who respond naturally, treating your imperfect English as sufficient for genuine communication rather than as a problem to be corrected, who use natural English themselves without slowing down excessively or simplifying so much that you are no longer hearing real language, who occasionally, gently, and naturally model the correct version of something you said imperfectly, not by stopping the conversation to give a lesson, but by responding in a way that includes the correct form. If you say, yesterday I go to the market, the ideal training partner says, oh, you went to the market, what did you get? Continuing the conversation naturally while including the correct form when in a way that your brain registers without the conversation ever stopping. The training partners who slow your development are the ones who correct you constantly, interrupting the flow of conversation to point out errors, which trains your brain to monitor for errors rather than to communicate. Or the ones who simplify their own English so dramatically in response to your level that you stop hearing natural language entirely and begin to think that simplified, slow, heavily enunciated English is what real English sounds like. Or the ones who finish your sentences for you when you pause, which, while kindly intended, deprives your brain of exactly the productive struggle it needs to build new pathways. If you can, seek out the first kind of training partner and gently, respectfully minimize your time with the second kind. This is not about being demanding or ungrateful. It is about understanding what your brain needs in order to develop and arranging your practice environment accordingly. I want to spend some time now on something that is both practical and profound, which is the relationship between your English brain and your native language brain, and how these two systems interact inside you. For a long time, scientists believed that the two languages of a bilingual person were stored separately in the brain, operating independently and switching between each other based on context. We now know this is not quite right. The two languages are constantly active simultaneously, even when you are only using one of them. When you are speaking English, your native language is not switched off. It is running in the background, available, influencing your English in ways both helpful and unhelpful. And when you are speaking your native language, your English is also running in the background, equally available. This means that the border between your two languages is softer than it feels. It means that the English brain and the native language brain are not two separate rooms, but two overlapping territories, with regions that are shared and regions that are distinct. And it means that strengthening your English does not require weakening your native language. The brain is not a zero-sum system in this respect. The stronger your English becomes, the more efficiently the two languages can coexist and cooperate, each enriching the other in ways that monolingual speakers can never experience. This is one of the most extraordinary gifts of bilingualism that science has revealed in recent years. People who operate in two or more languages develop a kind of cognitive flexibility, an ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, to switch between different frames of reference, to manage complexity and ambiguity. That is measurably different from monolingual cognitive patterns. Learning English is not just learning a communication tool. It is a brain training program that delivers benefits far beyond language itself. The discipline of managing two linguistic systems simultaneously makes the brain more agile, more adaptable, more creative. Every day that you practice English, you are not just building language, you are building a better brain. Now I want to give you something very concrete, a specific daily training schedule that I want you to consider seriously. Not because routine is the only way to learn, but because the brain responds exceptionally well to consistent, predictable practice. When your brain knows that English is coming at the same time every day, it begins to prepare for it. It warms up the relevant pathways in advance. It arrives at the practice already primed, already open, already ready to absorb and produce. Consistency is not just a productivity strategy, it is a neurological strategy. In the morning, the first thing, before your phone, before your coffee if possible, before the day's concerns have begun to crowd your mind, spend 5 minutes speaking English out loud to yourself. Not reading, not listening, speaking. Tell yourself what day it is, how you feel, what you plan to do today, what you are thinking about, what you dreamed about if you remember. 5 minutes of completely unfiltered, unrehearsed, imperfect English. Every morning. This practice wakes up your English brain at the start of every day and reminds it that it is needed, that it is in use, that it has a role to play in your life today. During the day, whenever you have a moment of unoccupied time waiting for something, walking somewhere, doing a routine physical task, bring your internal monologue into English. Do not reach for your phone. Do not fill the silence with music or noise. Let the silence be English. Think in English about whatever is genuinely on your mind. If you are worried about something, worry in English. If you are excited about something, be excited in English. If you are bored, be bored in English. These are the small, private, unglamorous moments of practice that accumulated over months and years do more for your fluency than any formal lesson. In the evening, spend 20 to 30 minutes on deliberate practice. This is your focused English time. Some days that might be shadowing, listening to native speech and imitating it in real time. Some days it might be extensive listening, a podcast or a documentary or a conversation between native speakers, consumed not for study, but for exposure. Some days it might be output practice, recording yourself speaking about something you care about, then listening back with curiosity rather than judgment, noticing what sounds natural and what does not. And some days it might be connection, a real conversation with a real person in English, however short, however imperfect, because real human connection in English does something for your brain and your motivation that no solitary practice can fully replicate. And at night, in those last few minutes before sleep, do what I described earlier. Review your day in English, not formally, not completely. Just let your last waking thoughts be English thoughts. What happened today that was interesting? What did I learn? What do I want to remember? What am I looking forward to tomorrow? Let English be the last language your conscious mind visits before sleep takes over. And let whatever your brain does with that language during the night, the consolidation, the organization, the deepening of connections that happens during sleep, work on your behalf without any effort from you at all. This is the training program. Morning speaking, daytime thinking, evening practice, nighttime review. It does not require hours. It does not require a classroom or a teacher or expensive materials. It requires only your brain and your commitment, and the understanding that every day you do this, something is being built that cannot be seen yet, but is absolutely, definitively, irrevocably there. I want to close this second part of our time together with something that I believe is the deepest truth about training your brain to speak English, something that goes beneath the neuroscience and beneath the practical strategies and beneath everything else I have said today. It is this: language is not just a skill. Language is identity. The English you are building is not just a tool you are adding to a toolkit. It is a new way of being yourself in the world. And the resistance you sometimes feel, the fear, the procrastination, the sense that fluency is always just out of reach, is not just the resistance of a brain facing a difficult task. It is sometimes the resistance of a person facing a transformation. Because becoming someone who speaks English fluently is not the same as remaining who you are, but with an additional skill. It is becoming a slightly different person, a larger person, a person who inhabits more of the world than before. This transformation is worth the discomfort. It is worth the embarrassing mistakes and the frustrating plateaus and the mornings when the practice feels pointless and the progress feels invisible. Every person who has ever crossed the threshold into genuine English fluency will tell you the same thing, if you ask them honestly. It was worth it. Not because of the opportunities it opened, though those are real. Not because of the people it allowed them to reach, though those connections are precious. But because of who they became in the process. Because of the particular kind of courage and persistence and openness that this journey demands, and in demanding it, develops. I think about that boy on the bicycle every time I want to remind myself why difficulty is worth facing. He did not know where the road was going. He could not see the destination from where he was standing. He only knew that there was a hotel 40 minutes away, and foreign visitors who spoke a language he wanted to speak, and a desire inside him that was stronger than the cold and the fear and the uncertainty. That desire was enough. It was more than enough. It turned out to be everything. You have that desire too. I can hear it in the fact that you are here listening to this, giving your time and your attention to the work of building something in yourself that did not exist before. That desire is the most important thing you have. It is more important than your current vocabulary, more important than your current grammar, more important than your current accent or your current confidence or your current level of fluency. Desire, sustained over time, becomes discipline. Discipline, sustained over time, becomes habit. Habit, sustained over time, becomes identity. And identity is permanent. Train your brain every day. In the small moments and the large ones, in the private silence of your own mind, and in the exposed, vulnerable, beautiful act of speaking to another human being in a language that is still becoming yours. Train your brain because it is capable of far more than you currently believe. Train your brain because the English that feels so far away right now is closer than you think, built into every conversation you have had, every word you have heard, every moment of struggle and breakthrough that has already happened inside you. Your brain is ready. It has always been ready. The only question that remains is whether you are ready to trust it. Trust it. Begin. The rest will follow.